Welcome back. Walgreens Chief Clinical Trials Officer Ramita Tandon spoke with our very own Yahoo Finance's Anjalee Khemlani earlier this month on Walgreens' new avenue into the healthcare space with the launch of its clinical trial business this past summer. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, at Walgreens, we're on this exciting journey as we move into healthcare and create this healthcare continuum and deliver, healthcare services at a local level. And we launched our clinical trials business in June of this year, a tech-enabled business, and really part of this complete healthcare continuum. And, clinical trials is something that, over the past few decades, very nuanced in the research enterprise ecosystem. But less than 5% of the US population participates in clinical trials, and 75% that do participate are Caucasian. So we believe that there's a tremendous opportunity, leveraging the Walgreens scale, the footprint, and the trust that it has established in the local communities as an opportunity to really disrupt how we deliver clinical trials into our local communities. So our goal as we've launched this business is really trying to bring trials into communities that have never had access before, and really part of the broader mission for Walgreens, again, as we move closer into healthcare and deliver healthcare into our local communities.
Right. And for those who don't know, normally it's through a provider or an established clinical site, a facility that tends to host these clinical trials, funded largely by the government or a sponsor. So that's really interesting as well, because it sort of shifts the dynamic of your relationship with these drug companies. Do you have some insight on what kinds of clinical trials you'd be sort of limited to just based on the availability of facilities and resources?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the typical approach is, as you mentioned, is that, most providers are asked to support manufacturers in the clinical trial ecosystem, and it's to find patients for trials. And oftentimes we know, providers and other practitioners, whether they're part of AMCs or their individual practices, can be extremely busy. And to put a clinical trial on top of busy practitioners can be quite burdensome to some extent. And so our goal is two-front. Number one, Walgreens serves roughly 120 million, 130 million lives that visit our stores and pharmacies on a regular basis. So we want to make sure that as we bring trials into communities, we are finding the right patients for trials, particularly in communities that have never had access to clinical research before. So number one is to help manufacturers find patients a lot faster. And we're using technology to enable that workflow. And it allows us to be more precise in finding patients that have the right disease conditions, the demographics, and the overall background, and match those patients to trials. And when we find those patients, our goal is to make patients feel comfortable to participate. Now, we know today there are a tremendous amount of barriers for patients to participate, whether they're travel barriers, language barriers, even, medical or digital literacy. And so our goal is, how do we make patients feel comfortable, but more importantly, make trials more accessible and convenient for patients to participate? So what we have done is leveraging our physical footprint and converting our stores and pharmacies as clinical trial centers. Now, we recognize if we give the opportunity for a patient to come into their local pharmacy, have an opportunity to talk to a pharmacist, to learn more about clinical trials and to be educated and feel more comfortable, and perhaps start to remove some of those barriers or preconceived notions about clinical trials, it's one step further to make it more convenient and improve the experience level for a patient to participate. So we're using our physical footprint as an opportunity for patients to come in and get clinical trial visits completed. Now, some of the services that we're able to provide are, the low complex services, so screening, diagnostic, and some blood draws. And we recognize that, in the ecosystem, we're not here to displace the provider and that patient relationship. In fact, that is a very vital relationship that exists. But we at Walgreens want to help enable and support that ecosystem so patients don't drop out. And in fact, they can come into their local Walgreens, get a normal follow-up visit completed, and keep that patient in the trial and start to improve the overall retention rates on a clinical trial.
So that's a really good differentiator to point out. It's not necessarily that you'll be full-on conducting these trials or being part of that protocol, but in the immediate follow-up after delivery, because I know some of these things can be pretty complex, like infusions. I can't imagine that Walgreens is yet at that stage to be able to support that. But is that a long-term goal? Is it, because you are doing some build-out, do you envision as, the company gets deeper into healthcare that this is going to be an area where you can even build out to have more robust, tools, medical tools and the like to be able to use for clinical trials?
Yeah, as we at Walgreens continues to build out our healthcare continuum service footprint and start to understand what our communities need, certainly it's something for us to continue to think about. But today, as we partner with a number of healthcare systems across the ecosystem and across the nation, our goal is to become a support mechanism for healthcare systems or other providers so that ultimately patients feel comfortable to participate and as well as, carry forward with the trial obligations. But certainly something for us to think about as we carry forward and we start to listen and learn and understand how the patients are feeling as they start to move through this process. And as we start to get more data, certainly we'll start to expand that footprint and the types of services that we can deliver under a clinical trial ecosystem.
Talk to me about the support for this, resources and the like. Does this come directly from the trial sponsors or are you partnering with the providers themselves? Where is that dynamic in play?
Yeah, good question. We have made some significant investments, both from a real world evidence perspective, where obviously, we have tremendous amount of information on the patient's pharmacy records. Through a partnership, we have access to clinical records, both structured and unstructured data. So we certainly have in-house staff that can help to analyze the information and start to help us understand the right patients for trials. And as we think about the trial conduct, we have created a centralized operations team that consists of project managers, clinical study coordinators, people that are well-versed in the clinical trial conduct, and to be able to support, whether we support on-site. So if a patient comes into our local pharmacies, we'll have staff available on-site. But also if a trial warrants more of a virtual or a hybrid model, we have the opportunity to digitize and use telehealth, and certainly our staff can support from that mechanism. And then finally, from a home health care, we certainly have some trials that warrant aspects of the clinical trial visit to be done at patients' homes. And certainly with our acquisition with CareCentrix, it allows us to mobilize efforts and deliver trial activities at a patient's homes. So we have certainly brought on a number of talent from the industry that understand the clinical trial space and can support the conduct. And certainly as we look to partner with providers, as we leverage physicians to help support the oversight of these clinical trials, we certainly do have a number of partners as we bring on board physicians to help support in this workflow.